My name is Nuno Crato, and I'm very pleased to be here at your international conference making a presentation about curricula, assessment, and focus on students. I work at the University of Lisbon. I've been working on educational issues, and I've been Minister of Education in Portugal. I'm very proud that at the end of my mandate, our country attained the best comparative international results ever. We passed over the OECD average in PISA, and in TEAM's fourth-year math, our students obtained results above many countries, usually well-placed, usually very well-placed, such as Finland. I think we need to do a few things in order to improve students' results. I thank you for the invitation. I thank Professor Wei-Ming Su for the very kind invitation to be with you. I also thank Professors Su Weilin, Hu-Ying Tsu, Pi Yang-Ung, and Chuang Li. We have been working together in order to analyze results from international survey at PISA 2018. We have been working with a set of experts, 12 experts, and we have written this book, which will be out very soon. I'm going to discuss here is based on my reading of the results, but it's my own reading. Other authors may have different opinions. Modern international surveys on student knowledge and skills can be traced back to the founding of the International Association for the Evaluation of Educational Achievement in 1958 at the UNESCO Institute for Education in Hamburg, with the ambition of providing reliable assessments of student outcomes. This association organized the first international science study, FIMS, in 1970, the sixth subject survey in 1970-71, the second studies in mathematics, the SIMS, in 1980, and the studies in science, the SEAS, in 1983. We can say that regular international large-scale assessments started in 1995 with the TEAMS, with an acronym that stands for Trends in International Mathematics and Science Study. Then, in 2000, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD, started the Program for International Student Assessment, PISA, which has become the best known of all international student surveys. The IEA further organized PEARLS, which is the third of these important studies, but many other studies are now organized. These international studies have a set of common characteristics. Firstly, country participation is voluntary. Each country pays for the costs and organizes the application of the surveys following common rules supervised by the promoting organization. Secondly, students are selected by a multi-stage random sampling method. Thirdly, many test questions are confidential, and this allows for its reuse across surveys for longitudinal calibration purposes. That means for allowing better comparison across years. Although each survey focuses on specific cognitive skills, each one provides data on a large variety of issues, such as teaching methods, students' perception of their abilities, and social and economic students' background. There are two main differences between PISA on one side and TEAMS and PEARLS on the other. And one is the selection of students and the other is the intended measurements. Don't forget that PISA has been organized by OECD and TEAMS and PEARLS by the IEA. While PISA is age-based, surveying 15-year-old students, regardless of their grade and type of program of study that they are following, TIMSS and PEARLS are grade-based. TIMSS is applied to the 4th and 8th grade students, and PEARLS to 4th grade students. While PISA tries to assess applied knowledge and skills, or literacy in a generic sense, TIMSS aims to be curriculum sensitive, and so tries to measure achievement based on an internationally agreed common basic curriculum. While the OECD organizes PISA with specific ideas of what about should education be, IEA organizes TIMSS to measure what each school system is achievement, taking into consideration each nation curriculum and aims. Even if a few things about these studies are questionable and debatable, the fact is that they inaugurate a new era in educational analysis. We now have a wealth of data for our studies, and this helps. What I'm showing here is an example of studies that can be made. Here we have the evolution of PISA in each 3 domains in my country, Portugal, across the years. And we can see that we have been improving across the years. We have been improving our results. And we can trace this and look at this against the measures, the policy measures that have been put in place. And we can look at what the students have done, the students that now take PISA, what they have done, where they have started, what they have had year after year. PISA is held every 3 years and encompasses 3 core domains: reading, mathematics, and science. Every wave or cycle of PISA is focused on one of these 3 domains, following thus each one a cycle of 9 years. So far, the largest and most comprehensive of all international large-scale studies has been PISA 2018. About 700,000 students from 79 participating countries and economies, representing more than 31 million 15-year-old students, performed the 2-hour test. Having as a reference the cycle in which each domain was for the first time the major one, and using results from the then participating OECD countries, PISA normalized initial scores by fitting approximately a Gaussian distribution with mean 500 and a standard deviation of 100 points each domain. Now, the OECD mean scores are 487, 489, and 489 for reading, mathematics, and science, respectively. OECD countries' results have been declining slightly, but in a steady way after 2009, as it can be seen here in this figure. Decreases are noticeable for mathematics since 2003. Although it's difficult to translate PISA scores into years of schooling, in order to estimate the effect of the differences, various studies have suggested that a difference in 40 score points is roughly equivalent to a difference between 2 adjacent year grades. This is an estimate across countries. If you use this estimate, we find noticeable changes between same waves, even if we only take into consideration OECD countries. For instance, the difference between the math scores in 2003 and 2012 amount to a loss of about a quarter of a school year. In order to simplify the interpretation of results, PISA scale is categorized into 6 ordinal proficiency levels. The minimum level is 1, although students can still score below the lower threshold of level 1. The maximum level is 6 with no ceiling. Mean scores are included in level 3. Students scored below level 2 are considered low performers, and those scoring above level 4 are considered high performers. In 2015, recognizing the worrisome number of low performers and the need to better discriminate those students, PISA has subdivided level 1 in 1A and 1B. In 2018, PISA introduced an additional third level, 1C. Based on a number of estimates, UNESCO has recognized the worrisome status of education worldwide and warned that more than half of 10-year-olds are below what they call minimum proficiency level, both in math and in reading. But don't think this is a problem only in poor areas. The United States and Europe are also struggling with education problems. In 2009, the European Union Strategic Framework for Cooperation in Education and Training set as a goal for 2020 that the share of low-achieving 15-year-olds in reading, mathematics, and science should be less than 15%. Low achievers are de facto defined by the European offices as students scoring below level 2 in the PISA scale. This goal is far from achieved, and it's not in sight. The share of low performers in the European Union has been slightly increasing. This is very worrisome. In 2018, it reached 21.7%, 22.4%, and 21.6% in reading, mathematics, and science, respectively. In this regard, Europe is only slightly better than the OECD average, and the situation is not improving, far from it. To some extent, almost all participating countries have been affected by PISA, TIMSS, and other studies. When the first cycle of results appeared, some countries were shocked by seeing themselves in a relative mediocre position. Norway is an example of a country in which newspapers made a scandal of the results obtained. Germany is another country that was really worried. Their students' results were discussed very harshly in newspapers. Others were less surprised or less concerned. But with successive cycles of ILSA studies, every participant country started paying more attention to the results and to their country's comparative position. In my country, first TIMSS and then PISA results were a shock, and the country reorganized itself step by step in its approach to schooling, abandoning many romantic ideas and stressing the need to have a better and more demanding curriculum and to assess better the students' progresses. We had no exams at the end of mandatory schooling, and then we introduced them in 2009. In a few years, we improved. It's curious to see that our Spanish neighbors started looking at us in a different way. What you see here is a newspaper from Spain saying that that country, Spain, should learn with Portugal. Spain and Portugal have a friendly rivalry, as you may know, so we have some pride in this recognition. Try to guess who is the person at the right. I'm a little bit older now, I know. Nowadays, the public disclosure of the results is carefully prepared by the ministries and authorities of each country. Discussions follow in the press, at conference, and in parliaments. Some try to minimize negative results, portraying them as a product of biased measuring instruments. Some try to diffuse negative results, portraying them as a consequence of general socioeconomic problems or historical cultural handicaps. At the same time, a number of countries have been elated by their excellent results or praised for their relative improvement. Politicians try to get credit for the successes, and educational analysts try to interpret the results, sometimes in the light of their ideological views. Serious researchers try to make sense of the results. No participant country has been completely indifferent to PISA studies. When tested in PISA, youngsters have been in formal schooling for about 10 years of their lives. Their knowledge, skills, and conduct have been shaped by many teachers, curricula, tests, textbooks, and other school factors. Most likely, successive governments and ministers have been in power, and a few legislative and administrative settings have changed. Furthermore, the social and economic status of students and their peers, parents' education, and many other factors have influenced students' results as measured in PISA. In education, things take time. All this means that it is extremely difficult to disentangle the impact of educational policy changes from a very complex set of factors that have been put in place at different points in time. A hotly debated topic is the time frame that should be adopted to try to measure the impact of specific policy changes. On one extreme, one can argue that any measure takes a long time to bring changes in education. Social economic status and parents' education level are known as some of the most important factors explaining the variability of students' outcomes. These factors certainly take generations to change, but they can be reversed by dynamic educational system, as the spectacular improvement of some Asian countries, such as yours, has shown. Apart from these generational slow changes, some educational policy measures also take an incredible amount of time to impact education. Think, for instance, on legislative changes on teachers' initial training requirements. Assume they are decided at year 0. They will impact students' choices through their selection of the high school appropriate courses in order to enter a chosen college program. Suppose new prospective teachers enter college 3 years later, take 5 years to graduate, and serve 1 year of an experimental contract before being hired as fully independent teachers. If these newly trained teachers start their career teaching grade level 5, PISA results reflect these new teacher training requirements when students are at grade level 10, i.e., 11 years after the legislative act. This example is not purely theoretical. In Finland, we know that there have been many improvements, and this country set a new high standard for teaching qualifications in 1979, when it decided that a master's degree is necessary as a qualification for all teachers, also at the primary level. Most analysts point to this point as an important factor for Finnish successes. When looking at 2018 PISA results, one is really looking at the impact of various generations' education, plus the impact of decades of policy changes. Yes, in education, some things take a long time to change. On another extreme, and in contrast to these long time frames, some educational measures take a very short time to impact students' performance. Curricular changes may have results soon. The same with exams. If in September, for instance, a national mathematics test for 9th graders scheduled to May is abolished, it is conceivable that 7 months later, in April, at the time of a PISA test, students should be more relaxed regarding their mathematics performance. Money matters, we know, but this is one of the most contentious topics in education. When one talks about investing in education, most likely one means, and is understood as meaning, financial investment. This is so common and pervasive that it almost sounds like a heresy to admit that additional funds may not be the central issue for improving education at a certain moment and at a certain country. As PISA and other international comparison studies have shown, reality is a bit more complex. Although always welcome, money is not essential for some important and beneficial improvements. The funding discussion many times obscures the real issues about educational quality. PISA 2015 was centered on science, and it showed a graph that has circulated in educational circles and surprised many people. This graph plots student scores in sciences against cumulative educational expenditure per pupil adjusted for purchasing power parity. It clearly shows that spending is correlated with education quality until a certain spending point, after which it has a very weak, non-significant correlation with spending. For some reason, PISA 2018 report discusses the same issue with a slightly different functional approach. This time, instead of a piecewise linear regression, the report adjusts a logarithmic function, which by nature is always monotonically increasing. A visual observation of data reveals essentially the same reality. Up to a certain level, situated around OECD average, the increase in expenditure roughly parallels the improvement in reading results. After this level, there is no visible association. Again, Portugal and Poland outperformed the Netherlands, Austria, and Luxembourg, 1/3 of the spending of the latter country. Taiwan easily outperforms the Netherlands with approximately the same spending per student. And the example of Estonia is even more striking. It performs better than almost all countries that have much higher education expenditure. All this means that a nuanced approach should be adopted as we discuss education spending. Another controversial topic in education is the relation between performance and equity. Everybody agrees that educational policy should aim to maximize educational excellence and reduce inequalities. But there are different approaches to achieve this. In reality, none of the goals make sense without the other. For a statistician, this is trivial. Location and dispersion are the ABC of statistical analysis. Students can improve in mean, while low performers get worse results. By the same token, inequality can be reduced at the expense of lowering everybody's attainment. However, it's very common to hear people debating either excellence or equity, and separately. At first, people debated excellency, but lately inequalities seem to be the sole priority. I'm going to argue that we may have beneficial inequality reduction, but we may also have undesirable reduction of inequalities. So we need to work on both fronts. Let's see one example. I'm going to take the example of Chile, a country that has struggled against the dramatic lack of quality of the system and have been trying to break the correlation between the socio-economic status and the differences in cognitive scores. But other examples could be chosen. Let's compare performance differences in PISA in Chile for the different economic, social, and cultural status of students' parents, what the OECD calls ESCS. These differences have been narrowed from 2006 to 2018, but at a high cost. Results worsened for all levels of ESCS and reduced more rapidly for higher levels. Now let's see the gaps between genders in math and sciences. These gaps have been reduced, but also at a high cost. In math, boys decreased their performance by 11 points, while girls improved theirs by 1 point only. In sciences, boys decreased their performance by 9 points, while girls improved theirs by 2 points only. My conclusion is simple. We should not discuss equality separate from performance. We talked about Chile, but Finland shows that problems exist even in the developed educational systems. The gender gap in reading literacy has consistently been one of the highest in the PISA participating countries. At the same time, Finland has been decreasing their results, essentially due to the increasing number of weak performers in all assessment areas, although high performers have also declined in mathematics and sciences. And the gap between the highest and lowest decile has widened in all areas, especially in readings and sciences. To put the Finnish evolution into perspective, it may help to know that the country usually reviews the curriculum approximately every 10 years. The last revisions went into effect in 2004 and 2016. It seems that Finnish decline started exactly when some changes were made to their pedagogical methods. This is a very important issue for all countries. Is the Finnish model, many praise, not the one that led them to the top, but the one that started their decline? This is an important question for all of us. The case of Portugal is also interesting. Up to 2015, the nation was able to steadily increase the academic levels of those at the bottom of the scale. At the same time, it was developing a demanding and well-structured education. The dropout rates decreased very fast, especially during the 2006-2015 period. This means that to be demanding doesn't harm the students with difficulties. In the following graph, we compare the evolution of the high performers and low performers for the same period according to PISA results. On the bottom left, we see those countries that have worsened the quality of education both for high and low performers. On the top left, we see countries that have improved the high but worsened the low performers. On the bottom right, we see countries that have improved the low but not the high performers. Finally, on the upper right, we see the countries that have both improved the low and the high performers. This is the place where we all should be. But unfortunately, few countries succeeded in this. To sum up, it's exactly what we have been saying. We can reduce inequalities, but worsen the quality for all. What we would like to do is to increase quality for all. I'm sorry about my pride in this, but I have to tell you that Portugal was praised by 2015 PISA report for being in this last quadrant. However, things sometimes change. Unfortunately, in 2015, national exams were abolished for some school grades and start pressing for curricular flexibility and less knowledge goal-oriented education. Then, as you can see in the PISA results graph, overall results stalled and even registered slight decreases. Now, let's see what happened to low performers. Did they benefit from this less stringent approach? Quite the opposite. The estimated fraction of low performers increased a bit in sciences and reading, and decreased only slightly in mathematics. In parallel, the estimated fraction of top performers decreased in science and oscillated very slightly in reading and mathematics. The evolution of Taiwan gives us hope. I'm now quoting work by Su Wenlin, Hui Ying-Tzu, Yi Chung-Lu, and Pi Xia-Hung. I hope I'm quoting them correctly. I'm sure I'm not pronouncing correctly their names, and I apologize for it. Although still performing at a very high international level, Taiwanese are worried about some declines in their performances, namely in mathematics and science. As these authors explain, top performers helps to develop a country talent pool. So, increasing the proportion of top students in reading and science and maintaining Taiwanese students' high performance in mathematical literacy are critical goals for Taiwanese education system. In parallel to this concern, Taiwanese have a policy of actively assisting students with low performance. This is more than necessary given the worrisome level of low performers, namely in reading. In order to change this reality, my co-workers tell me, Taiwan is developing programs for both teaching and assessment related to literacy. In line with modern research on curriculum coherence, it's good to see teaching and assessment equally stressed. In Taiwan, some gaps have narrowed in a desirable way. The gender gap in reading narrowed because male students' reading performance improved and female students' reading performance remained the same. Contrarily to many countries, Taiwan was also able to reduce the correlation between socioeconomic status and scores. High stakes and low stakes tests are also a controversial topic. The first type of these assessment tools, that means exams that have consequences for students' future path, are often associated with a conservative view and a ruthless selection of students that predominantly alienates those from more disadvantaged backgrounds. The second type, that means formative assessment tests that have no or minimal direct impact on students' path, tend to be associated with a progressive view that cares about inclusion and the progress of students. But I'm going to stress that we don't need to take these ideological views and we should have a fresh approach. I have a different point of view, arguing that both forms of assessment are necessary. Low-stakes tests are valuable for giving frequent feedback to students, helping them regularly in improving their knowledge and skills. High-stakes tests or exams are essential to nudge students' progresses, to make sure different levels of learning are attained at each step, and to increase greater transparency and efficiency in the educational system as a whole. I'd like to talk a bit about a few countries' examples. In Estonia, there are tests in grades 3 and 6, plus high-stakes exams in grades 9 and 12. The Estonian model uses assessment to detect struggling students early enough and to support them while they are in the same age group with their peers. Consequently, grade repetition is not commonly practiced, and the poorest students in Estonia perform better than the top quarter with the most affluent background in many countries. In Poland, external national examinations at the end of every stage of education creates both incentives for teachers and students and social pressure for achieving good outcomes. In this country, external assessment of students' outcomes and a large degree of school autonomy constitutes a good mix of freedom and external monitoring. In Portugal, the introduction of high-stakes exams for mathematics and reading was followed by a PISA score improvement. Later, removal of some high-stakes exams in grades 4 and 6 had detrimental consequences on low-stakes assessments like PISA. In Spain, the lack of standardized testing delayed the detection of students lagging behind and coexisted with a high level of grade repetition, 36% versus 13% in the OECD average. As Monsegomendio said, this system, with its lack of reliable and uniform assessment, although designed in theory to promote equality, led to the worst type of inequality, the expulsion of students from an education system which was blind to their performance and insensitive to their needs. A related problem exists in the United States. There have been large policy changes in the US, but they have neither led to better average outcomes nor to the consistent narrowing of achievement gaps. Many different programs intending to improve the educational system haven't been evaluated because of a lack of reliable student assessment. Each country is a country, but isn't evaluation something needed everywhere? PISA 2015 report included results that surprised many policy advisors and policymakers, but pleased many cognitive scientists. Those results revealed an association between different teaching practices and outcomes in the sciences. Unfortunately, no similar graphs were reported for PISA 2018, which has reading as the major domain. The first results, summarized in this figure taken from the OECD PISA report, reveal some widely documented associations between performance and variables such as students' socioeconomic profile, as well as the socioeconomic profile of his or her school, the language spoken at home, previous retainment, absenteeism, and gender. For these associations, there were no surprises. However, some other associations provide strong support for what some people call teacher-led learning and strong arguments against what some people call child-led learning. We verify that the index of teacher-direct instruction is positively correlated with students' outcomes in science. And the index of inquiry-based instruction is negatively correlated with the same index. It's also interesting to notice that shortage of materials and shortage of staff seem to make no difference in students' results. This other figure confirms and complements some of these results. Curiously, it's more important that teachers explain how scientific concepts can be manifest in different phenomena than that teachers explain the relevance of scientific concepts for people's lives. This seems counterintuitive, but is a very powerful argument in favor of knowledge, even in favor of pure knowledge. Research has shown that trying to boost students' motivation to raise attainment through demonstrating the usefulness of knowledge does not necessarily favor learning. It's knowledge that leads to knowledge curiosity. I repeat, it is knowledge that leads to knowledge curiosity. This same figure shows that teachers' explanation supports good results, while students' design of their own experiments, investigations, and class debates hamper good results. This is surprising on all accounts. Supporters of so-called inquiry-based teaching cannot deal well with these statistics. By the same token, supporters of psychology research-based methods of direct instructions don't reject the importance of students' hands-on experimentation and student active answer-seeking activities. We cannot ignore these results, but we have to be careful. I believe that teacher explanation here in this inquiry is associated with confident teaching and with teachers' training and quality. Predominance of students-free investigations is statistically associated with an organized teaching and teachers' lack of coherent and confident content knowledge. It's not necessarily so, but it's like this in many countries. These are statistical results. Anyway, at least we need to be careful and progress, improve, but don't reject well-proven methods just because they are old. Before concluding, I just want to stress a few points that many times are forgotten when we discuss 21st century education. The first point is this: equal opportunities are attained through a demanding education. A challenged education is the only real instrument for poor people, for disadvantaged students to progress. So, if we water down the curriculum, if we oversimplify the curriculum, if we forget about assessment, we are not doing a good service both to higher situated learners and to those who are struggling to attain reasonable results. Second, I'd say that we have to modernize schools, we have to modernize teaching, but still we have to convey knowledge and skills. We have to convey knowledge and develop skills. We cannot forget about these, because these two pillars are the pillars of education. And also, structure helps learning. We learn by building upon what we know, and skills don't develop in a vacuum. What I mean by this is the following. The principle, the fundamental thing into learning is what we already know. So we have to build things one after the other. This is maybe the fundamental result from cognitive psychology in the last 100 years. Knowledge builds upon knowledge. Knowledge needs knowledge. The more we know about a certain subject, the more we can research, the more we can know about this same subject. And skills don't develop in a vacuum means that we don't have skills for everything. We have skills for different things, and we have skills for reading, we have skills for mathematics, we have skills for history, and these skills are domain-based. We need knowledge about these domains in order to develop these skills. There is no such thing as development of skills independently of knowledge and independently on the subjects. Third, we need to focus continuously on permanent and central pillars. And of course, we cannot fail reading and math. These are the basic things. Then we have many other things. Data analysis, which is a modern way of looking at statistics and introducing more into statistics. History, geography, sciences, arts. These are the permanent and central pillars. We don't know exactly what will be the jobs in the future, but we know that jobs in the future will need these skills, will need this knowledge. So critical and active citizens in a changing world need always knowledge and needs training that is not easily outdated. And finally, we have to increase self-regulation through external assessment. We need to give additional help for the students who are struggling. We need the school autonomy to be based on some national references. We should not micromanage schools, but we should evaluate the results of schools. That's the essential thing. Autonomy, but autonomy with responsibility. As we finish, I would like to share with you 10 conclusions that I've drawn from reflecting upon 10 countries' experiences. And I'm getting back to the book I showed to you at the beginning, Improving a Country's Education, a book that we wrote and should be out in a couple of weeks. The first conclusion is this: everything starts with the curriculum. So if you want to organize an educational system, think that curriculum is the basis. Some countries have a national curriculum. Other countries have regional curricula. Other countries have curricula that depends on schools. But we need to have a curriculum. My hunch would be is that it's better to have a national curriculum. But if we don't have a national curriculum, we should have a curriculum at each school, and the more coordinated, the better. The second thing is that it doesn't suffice to have a curriculum. It doesn't suffice to have a few notes about what we want students to learn. The curriculum has to be ambitious, has to be rigorous, and has to be structured. Curriculum has to have detailed explanations of what we want students to know, what we want students to master. Third, everything should be coherent with the curriculum. We are talking about exams, we are talking about textbooks, we are talking about school activities, we are talking about auxiliary material. Everything should be coherent with the curriculum. Fourth, we need to fight both for quality and for improving struggling students. So at this moment, it's very frequent to hear that we cannot raise quality because if we raise quality, we are harming struggling students. Or the opposite of that, we need to raise quality and forget about struggling students, or that we have to concentrate only on struggling students. I would say no, we have to do both. We have to do quality and improve struggling students, and we can do both. Fifth, we need a balance between innovation and improving teaching methods. Teaching is an activity that has been organized for 2 millennia. So it's something where we have lots and lots of experience now, and we know a couple of things that work and have worked. And so we should innovate, but we should always keep in mind that there are proven methods, and we shouldn't just change everything from one moment to the next. 6, assessment is crucial. Low stakes assessment, high stakes assessment, all forms of assessment are necessary. If we don't evaluate students, we don't know what's going on in the educational system. Teachers' quality is crucial on the medium-long run. The quality of a teacher's body in a country is a good predictor of what this country can achieve in the educational system. Of course, we need a good curriculum, we need everything else, but if we don't have good teachers, it's very difficult to progress. Then we need to involve parents and the public, because parents are those that should put pressure on their kids. The public is the biggest supporter, or can be the biggest supporter, to improve education quality. Now, it's very difficult to stress this because this seems obvious. The essential is students' progress. But we need to stress it, because many times we hear just that we need more money for the system. We need to hire more students, to hire more teachers. We hear that we need more tablets. Of course, all these things can be very useful and necessary. But what we really need is that our students learn more, learn better, develop better their qualities and their preparation for the century ahead. And finally, I'd say that educational policies need to be judged by their results rather than by intentions. And this is a very common mistake. People think, oh, we have these good intentions, so our policy is good. No, we need to evaluate the policies, and we need to look at what happened to students. Do they know more? Are they better prepared? That's the real good question. And that's the only question that should guide us in the long run. Well, that's my final slide, and my final slide has only 2 words. Thank you.